Hello, everyone, and welcome to Job Board Geek. It's the podcast about the business of connecting candidates and employers. I'm Jeff Dickey Chasins. I'm your host, the Job Board Doctor, and today I'm here with the co-host, Stephen Rothberg of College Recruiter. Hey, Stephen, how's it going?
It is going really well. I'm in New Mexico this week, and looking out the window, seeing mountains and a lake. It's not a hard life.
Just rub it in, Stephen. Just rub it in, okay? Today we have a great guest, someone I've known for quite a while, and someone that everyone in the industry knows, Lee Biggins of CV Library. He has lots of interesting things that I think he's going to tell us about. But first, I wanted to start out on something that I got from the AIM Group. And if you don't know about the AIM Group, you should check them out. They do great research on the recruitment industry. And they wrote up an article about Craigslist. They've actually documented, based on a bunch of analysis, how much Craigslist has been earning over the last several years. And back in 2018, Craigslist actually went over $1 billion in revenue. And then they had a huge drop off over the last 3 or 4 years. Well, surprise, Craigslist is up last year, 30% in the job posting listings, which is not a surprise to me since everyone was up last year. But I think it's interesting. It made me think about the role that Craigslist has played in the job industry. Everyone kind of competes with them because they're out there, but in a way, no one really competes with them because they are so much cheaper than anyone else. They don't have any kind of focus. They're everywhere. So in the industry, we call Craigslist a horizontal. Another example of a horizontal would be an OLX. Another example would be Facebook Marketplace. And then, traditional job sites like CV Library, like College Recruiter, are what we call verticals, where they're focusing specifically on jobs. And what I've been thinking about a lot lately is it seemed like there was a huge spurt in activity on horizontals in the job industry before the pandemic. And now things seem to have flattened out. Some of the horizontals have pulled out of the job business. And I just, I really don't have an answer. I just kind of speculate about what the horizontals are going to do. And are they any sort of threat to the verticals? Or is this just Jeff staying awake late at night for no particular reason? You tell me, Stephen, what do you think?
Well, first of all, I got a chuckle out of you saying like no focus and that they're all over the place. It kind of sounds like what my wife says to me when she's asking me to get some stuff done around the house. But the AIM Group, I subscribe to a newsletter that they have for the recruitment vertical, and they also have automotive and retail, and it is without a doubt the best analysis, the best research of anything out there. And what I really love about it is how global it is, because they're going to have stories on UK job boards, and they'll have stories on Swiss automotive sites. And you can really, really learn a lot by looking at what's working and what's not working in other verticals and other industries. And Craigslist is no exception to that. Is a horizontal working well? Is it not working well? And I do think the consensus of opinion was it's not a good place for recruitment ad dollars, and that's not going to be a thriving business. And people would just point to Craigslist being down by almost half. Turns out that during a pandemic, classified advertising takes a hit. What a shock! It's now. Craigslist is one of those anomalies where it works because it works. Anybody that I hear that says, oh, we're building our user experience so it's just like Craigslist, I know I can have a look at my watch and figure that they're going to be out of business in about 3 hours, because it works for Craigslist, but it's never worked for anybody else. So I question the viability, the long term, years from now, of horizontals in recruitment advertising, because I just think that over time, the Googles and the Bings of the world are going to be more and more prominent places for people to find that information. You're not going to have to go to a newspaper to find recruitment advertising. It's not 1952, it's 2022. So I'm more bullish on the verticals, on the specialists, than I am on the generalists.
And strangely enough, you actually operate a vertical. So I guess that's a good match, right? You're bullish on what you do.
There's absolutely no bias whatsoever. And if you believe that, I've got some beautiful land to sell you in Florida.
Yeah, right. Well, let us leave that where it is and go on to our guest, Lee Biggins of CV Library. Thanks so much for coming on to Job Board Geek today.
Thanks for having me, Jeff.
Yes, I'm glad you're here. And I was just wondering, for the people here in the non-UK audience that might not know you and know your company as well, why don't you tell us a little bit about where you came from and what CV Library and all the associated sites that you guys have, what you're all about?
Sure, no, of course, happy to do that. Well, for starters, in the US, we'd be more recognized as Resume Library.
Right.
And in Ireland, again, cvlibrary.ie. And then we have a huge network of sites which really are there to drive traffic rather than service recruiters. But fairly humble beginnings, I'd like to think, if I'm allowed to say so myself. I was very entrepreneurial at school, various different initiatives like selling cold cans of drinks to fishermen, like a mini car washing empire for all my neighborhoods. But safe to say, I wasn't particularly head down and a grafter at school. I always wanted to just run my own company and earn money. For that, I left school and went to work for my dad, and he cracked the whip pretty hard on me, fitting carpets and flooring for the best part of sort of 6 or 7 years. Multiple things working for my father and some family things. You know, in the end, I wanted to go out and do my own thing, and there was the right time to do it. And I put a CV together and just thought, well, you know, this isn't going to be as straightforward as I first thought. Going to find a job in an office or wherever it was, I'd have to send my CV all over the place and look, you know, for jobs in the back of newspapers. And anyway, the internet had just kicked off. Martha Lane Fox had just floated lastminute.com, and you know, I just came up with the idea if I started a website where you put your CV or resume on and everyone can come and find you. So £850 later on a Hewlett Packard and the Internet Startup Bible, and then down the pub, as we call it in England, to find an old mate that had started up a car enthusiast website, and CV Library was born. And
wow.
You know, like, I didn't really have any qualifications for the role of, you know, running a company or building a company or the internet, but no one else did either. The internet was new to everyone. We were idea conceived in 99 and launched in 2000. And, you know, we learned very quickly. We kept up with the bigger players. We just borrowed £9,000 to start the business. And yeah, here we are today, you know, closer to $60 million turnover, and very, very profitable, and, you know, enjoying a lot of the success from 20 something years of really hard work. But I guess, you know, it's not been a straightforward journey, as many of you know. It was certainly easier in the first 10 years than the back 10. With various challenges, obviously the recession, which we came through very well. But, you know, some of the things you actually were just touching on earlier, like the horizontals. I mean, you know, first of all, things started to go mobile, and then the social networks came along and we had to adapt to those. But interestingly enough, just reflecting on it from a candidate journey, which obviously we've always done, and we've built the business from trying to satisfy our job seekers and the user, and of course the great customer service we offer our recruiters. But actually, you know, if I think about the way you apply for a job on CV Library or Resume Library now, and how you first did in 2000, there's really no difference. You come and search for the job you want. You might get there through a jobs by email or an alert, and of course we've all improved our matching algorithms. versus profiles, etc. But you all still click on the apply button, and the only difference is back then is we would just send the application straight into the recruiter. Now, unfortunately, we have hundreds of hurdles to jump through, ATS integrations to try and streamline that. And yeah, so it's not us that's changed. The industry has changed around us. We had it so simple, so easy to start with in terms of the process and the user experience. There wasn't really any way to improve that, but now we're having to do quite a lot.
Yeah, I think that's interesting that there's been a focus, you know, as long as I've been in the industry, and I've been in, I hate to say it, even longer than you have, but there's always been this focus on the HR side of trying to automate things. But when the automation comes in, it tends to complicate things. Like you said, you know, you start out and it's very simple, it's very straightforward, and then you throw in an ATS. And then you say, well, if we've got an ATS, maybe we should add this and this and this and this. And one day you're sitting there saying, my God, it takes someone 45 minutes to apply for a job, which is nuts. So I think it is interesting when you have the industry sort of grow up around you.
Yeah, and there's certainly lots of talk about the death of the CV and things like that. But, you know, people like ourselves have, you know, produced a CV builder recently for those that don't have CVs or in jobs that sit with outside, you know, where you normally have a resume or a CV, so you can, you know, build that and distribute it really quickly. And that helps with some of these ATSs because, you know, back in the day, you might have been able to just say, send a profile, so to speak, and now they want everything under the sun, and we can index some of those questions the ATS asks, so the candidate doesn't have to keep filling them out when we do repeat applications to those particular ATSs and things. But you're quite right. A lot of these things are really just diluting the process, and I really hope that recruiters, you know, especially in the enterprise world, will start to realise actually now it's a much more competitive market to take on candidates, that they need to adapt and do things quite quickly. 10-page forms aren't going to suffice, and people are even, you know, video interviewing technology has a place, and it's, you know, it's certainly helpful, but candidates then having to record videos and recruiters then having to watch them and video CVs and things, I think overcomplicates just trying to discover whether a candidate is right for the role in the first instance or not.
One of the things, Lee, that's always really impressed me about, you know, you personally and your company more generally is your, it seems from my perspective that you've always had this embracement of adaptation, that when the industry changes around you, when legislation changes, you adapt to it. You don't try to pretend in 2022 that the world is the same as it was in 2000. And I've seen job boards, marketplaces, call them what you wish, come and go, where they initially have a fair amount of success. Something significant changes outside of their company. They refuse or are unable to adapt, and their business just sort of slowly dwindles away. It's rare. I can't think of an example where a really successful business just sort of went out of business overnight because of some external force, but it seems like it's like a death by 1,000 paper cuts.
Monster is a good example.
Yeah. It's you know, you can't look at Monster in 2022 and say it's significantly different in 2021 or 2021 to 2020. But if you look back to 2000, right, they were the monster. You know, they're still a significant player. I think people underestimate their market presence and how many candidates they help find employment a year, et cetera. But it is a shadow of its former self. With you being in the UK and so much of your business being in the UK, you've had more than your fair share of hurdles and external obstacles to overcome in the last couple of years. You know, talk with us about how you've approached adapting your business model with in light of GDPR, when you knew that was coming and what the impact of that would be. And even just for the benefit of the listeners in, Asia, for example, that might not know what a GDPR is, maybe you can explain that. And then also kind of on top of that, then you had the pleasure of Brexit and the impact that had too. So if you talk with us about the GDPR and Brexit adaptations that you had to make.
Yeah, obviously there's a few things there, and you're absolutely right. It's adapt or die. And I think, thankfully, we're still a very agile business. We are a smaller business, and we are able to adapt. And I think it's going to be very interesting longer term to see some of those key players like LinkedIn and Indeed, when their businesses are as old as Monster and Career Builder, actually whether they'll be capable of adapting too. And obviously they've set the scene for how the job board world should operate, and we have to follow those organizations, and we do so. And some of it's really challenging. I mean, programmatic is hugely challenging at the moment, and you talk about how we have to adapt our commercial model and bringing in pay for performance and then truly programmatic, and they're discussions that I have meetings about every day. And layer on top on that, how quickly jobs are changing in the candidate experience. And I will answer your questions in a second, but just looking at, how many feeds we have to process and how quickly we have to process them these days. I mean, Amazon could send us 30,000 jobs in the morning. By lunchtime, 5,000 of those jobs could be, could be taken down or expired because they've hit the number of applications they put out to the programmatic market. They could have changed their bid. They could have changed their job titles. It's just an awful lot to keep up with from the 28-day listing, which you knew was a safe bet with, one cost to it some years ago. And that's moved very quickly. In terms of GDPR, I have to say, I'm not a GDPR specialist, and I'd be very careful about what advice I'd give and what I say about it. We invested, a considerable amount in it. Things like opt-ins changed quite a little bit, so you weren't able to automatically opt in to people. So that was the main fundamental changes. And for us, particularly where it really hurt us was actually training. We used to do a lot of online, offer a lot of online training courses and things like that. And that in the UK is that now actually not part of your service. It's seen as an effectively paid advertising or something like that. So, unless you opt people into those things, you have to stop them. And we were sending out, tens of millions of emails a month and making hundreds of thousands of revenue off those. That's a revenue stream that went overnight. People like Reed have adapted to that in the UK very well, but as it wasn't our core business, it was better to let it go. But we've never bought data lists from a candidate perspective, from a job seeker perspective, or anything like that. So we didn't really have to change our behavior in the way we were, emailing people. We did have a few instances where we had advertised a feed of jobs via LinkedIn, and that journey had tripped up because we then sent a candidate a job alert. They hadn't opted into it. And there was a few things that caught us out, but we caught 95% of things pretty quickly. And to be honest with you, reacting to the feedback of reasonable candidates was all well received and wasn't difficult. Unfortunately, there was a few serial, I forget the word now, few serial people out there that knew the law very well, and they were actually deliberately targeting the job boards to try and get money out of us by deliberately signing up for certain journeys and then coming to us demanding effectively ransoms, to which I certainly didn't pay any of them. And we actually went to court with one fellow, which took over a year and a half from him, and he got about £150 and, total waste of their time. But I wasn't going to submit to it because we knew we'd have another 50 more had we done that. Unfortunately, the bigger businesses would have just paid them off, and that would have just driven more of that. But enough about that. So, the GDPR thing we came through pretty quickly. Obviously, we've got CCPA and stuff to deal with in America, but I think that's become much easier than it was. The ATSs obviously have had a little bit more heavy lifting because as recruits have ownership through them of that data, you have to be a little bit more careful. Also, on a CV, there isn't too much. We had to do things like remove anyone that had put sort of religious beliefs or political beliefs or anything like that had to be stripped out. So we had to build some passing technology for that kind of thing, but that was pretty straightforward. In terms of Brexit, well, that that obviously completely stagnated growth in the UK for 3 or 4 years, and was a very painful experience. And I'd say probably my most stressful time watching the media and truly watching our politicians completely mess it up. And the exodus it caused of, the lower level workers, the blue collar workers and stuff. We had a lot of Europeans doing a lot of jobs, quite frankly, the British are too lazy to do. And that's, I think, on top of the pandemic, caused this huge spur of, need to find people to fill these roles. I mean, we have a lot of hospitality organisations and, other organisations we weren't particularly strong in that used to put adverts in the window and they'd have like 30 people to walk in for one job. They can't get a single person. So actually, the longer term, I think it has benefited us. Politically, do I think Brexit is the right thing for the UK? In some regard, yes. I do think we've lost a little bit of our identity and we need to claim some of that back. But, I think we need to wait much longer to actually see whether it's the right move or not. I think when you see some of these getting a little bit off piece now, but if you look at some of the things going on with China and Russia, and would we be better off as a, as a group with Europe and everything? Possibly.
It's interesting. So Lee, I had one question I definitely wanted to ask you, because you guys do a lot of things that I admire from the perspective of being a job board consultant. And one of the things that you do that I assume it must be effective, because you've been doing it the whole time I've been watching the site, is that you guys put out a steady stream of press releases about what's going on with the labor force. And you obviously do a lot of surveys and research, and then you're always in there talking about this and that. And I see it continually getting picked up in all the HR media that I follow. I probably follow 50, 60 feeds. So I'm just curious, how did that get started? And is it successful? Is that why you keep doing it? And, what's your advice for job boards that aren't doing it?
Sure. Look, that's a really good question, and not one I've had to answer before. So I'll give it my best. And full transparency from me, as you'd always expect. So no, we've always been hot on the PR front, and I've always seen the value of the brand. Appearing publicly in the press. Now, we were doing really, really well with press, and actually a lot of it was around, would you take the dog to work and all of these things. And I really wanted us to sort of, the press loved that kind of thing, and we tried to move away to that, to be more educational PR and running. I was actually in the early days very shut down about asking our database anything other than, do you want to apply for this job? I just saw anything as a distraction. But it was demonstrated to me that if we put out polls in the right manner and we used our audiences to try and educate the public, then there is value in that. So that's what we did, and we have a very talented individual and a press team, and we do put out a lot, and it does get very well received and picked up. So thank you for that. Measuring the true value of that, well, that's a good question as a business that's trying to measure absolutely everything now. And like other businesses, we brought BI tools in, and we have heads of data, and we're crunching huge amounts of data. I thought we were always a data business, but actually I'm pretty shocked at how we really weren't a data business, and we're now trying to become one and trying to be led by the data in everything we do. The truth is, trying to measure how many people read and react to what is still quite an old school media, even if it's a digital old school media, and someone reads it on the Daily Mail versus reads it, actually in the Times, is quite difficult. But if I'm honest, for what it costs us to run that data and produce that data and fill it out, I think people will be pleasantly surprised. And, I don't do PR for the sake of doing PR. Don't put stuff out just because, you want to say that you got into 5 magazines and do it for the sake of it. Do it because there is a wider goal. And our goal is to become, seen as an educator for both job seekers and recruiters and an authority in that area. We just want to give, we don't just put that stuff out as PR. We actually use that to help design our products, and some of it comes from product discovery. And a lot of it's fed back into what recruiters should be doing and reacting when they're using our service. So there's quite a spread of value that is sometimes quite hard to determine all of it.
Well, I think, and Stephen actually does the same thing with College Recruiter. They're very active in pushing out information about their audience and sort of taking the position of thought leaders. I always encourage my clients, if they can, to do this sort of work, because the first thing it does is it raises awareness. People are going to say, oh yeah, Lee Biggins, CV Library, I remember that. That's the first part of the battle in terms of sales when you're working with agencies and employers. And then the second part is like you were saying, you actually are able to a certain degree guide the conversation and get focus on things that you think are important or that might be important for your audience. And so I just think, it's a great model. And so kudos to you guys.
Thanks. Yeah, there is also a wider SEO value, which we need to tap into much more, which would be of huge value to any job board out there.
Yeah, and and I'm glad that you mentioned that, Lee, because one of the reasons that we got into producing a lot of content was SEO. Actually, way back, probably early 2000s, we had a SEO consultant by the name of Joel Cheeseman. When he was still writing the Cheesehead blog. And he really set us on the right course and just write content that people actually will value. Don't write content that you think is just going to get you to the top of the listings of Google. It's a recipe for disaster. But
I agree.
When we publish content, we're very deliberative of who the audience is and what our cost is. And it's not an ego stroke. It's not about making somebody feel good or important. It's about getting that audience, the employer, the candidate, whoever it might be, to be more aware of us, maybe take some action.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Well, listen, Lee, I appreciate you spending some time with us today. It's been great chatting with you, and
Pleasure.
I wanted to ask you, if people want to get in touch with you, how can they get in touch with you?
Probably the easiest way is just look for Lee Biggins on LinkedIn. There's not many Lee Biggins out there, thankfully. I'm pretty good at keeping an eye on that, and I'll be happy to get back to them if not from one of the other channels. It will come through to me, no doubt.
Okay, great. And Stephen, if people want to get in touch with you, how do they get in touch with you?
Well, they can find me here in Elephant Butte, New Mexico. Butte, B-U-T-T-E. I've been dropping the E and calling it Elephant Butt, but that's another story for another day. Or better yet, email me, Stephen@collegerecruiter.com. Lee, it is such a pleasure to see you again.
You too, and hopefully we'll get to see each other in person this year.
Hell yeah.
That would be great.
And you too, Jeff.
Yeah. Well, folks, that is it for today's episode of Job Board Geek. Please be sure to subscribe and review us if you want to on any of your favorite podcast platforms like Apple, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, et cetera, et cetera. My name is Jeff Dickey Chasins. I'm the Job Board Doctor, and you've been listening to the only podcast about the business of connecting candidates and employers. That is all for now, and we will see you again not too long from now. Bye.